Good day and welcome to BRICS Business Show, the program where we explore the ideas, policies, investments, and innovations shaping the future of trade industry and economic development across BRICS nations and the wider global south. I'm Ayanda Holo. As the global economy undergoes a profound transformation, nations are rethinking supply chains, financial systems, investment partnerships, and the rules that govern international trade. Against this backdrop, South Africa's business leaders, policymakers, economists, financial experts recently gathered in Sandton for the strategic dialogue hosted by the South African chapter of the BRICS Business Council. The objective was clear: to develop recommendations that will help shape South Africa's contribution to the upcoming engagements of BRICS that will be held in India. The upcoming BRICS engagements under India's chairship and strengthening cooperation across BRICS family. The discussions on some of the most important questions facing Global South today. The first question is, how can BRICS countries increase intra-trade amongst themselves? The second question would be, what role can local currencies play in reducing impact of global financial shocks? The third question would be, how can new payment systems unlock opportunities for entrepreneurs and investors? What reforms are needed to strengthen development finance and infrastructure investment? And perhaps the most important of all, how can African countries position themselves to benefit from one of the fastest growing economic partnerships in the world? Today, we unpack all those questions with the South Africa's leading voices in business and trade. Our guest is Advocate Mtho Xulu, President of the South African Chamber of Commerce and Industry, also a Chairperson of the Trade Investment Working Group for the BRICS Business Council. Advocate Xulu, welcome to BRICS Africa Channel.
Thanks for having us.
Please take us through today. What was the session about and what were the objectives of this consultative session?
Thank you very much. We had a great session today in Johannesburg, South Africa, in an event that was themed the Strategic Dialogue on Global Trade and Finance, which was co-hosted by the two standing working groups of the BRICS Business Councils, being the Trade and Investment Working Group, of which I'm the chair, as well as the Financial Services Working Group. So we wanted to look at the interplay between the current happenings in global trade and how then do you fuse in the conversation around finance. So ultimately, we were able then to convene a number of panels that ran, parallel and in series, looking at the position that South Africa finds itself in the global trade environment currently, and then obviously all throughout the day trying to tease out the opportunities that lie within BRICS, and obviously the conversation about how we're progressing on the issue of payment systems, financial architecture, and obviously the conversation around local currencies.
Everyone has been talking about the local currencies and the digital currencies, not to only rely on the dollar, but to diversify payment systems. What kind of insights can you share with us that came out today?
So as I mentioned earlier, and as the dialogue mentioned, it was rooted on two elements of the BRICS Business Council. On the one hand, we were looking at trade and investment, and how what payment methods are available, what trade facilities are available to finance trade amongst member states, entrepreneurs within member states, and taking it further to say, how does digitization play a role in exposing and making it seamless and more secured to trade amongst the member states? So technology and financial solutions came into place in terms of how it can unlock trade. Also then took it a step further to say, how do we then start spreading the intentions of a national development bank to start being integrated with member state banking systems for it to be able to be more viable for entrepreneurs to be funded. So, for instance, as you know, the National Development Bank now largely focuses on sovereign banking, sovereign debt. So it actually really borrows on public sector opportunities. However, the big opportunity is the private sector trade. So our colleagues then from financial services started expanding in terms of how do we expand that mandate, make sure that the NDB is part of the reforms of global banking systems to unlock opportunities that are unique to BRICS members. Over and above that, then obviously our colleagues from the task force responsible for payments under financial services then started peeling off the issue of, what is the payment system? Why do we have to box ourselves in the existing one? So what we've been saying that the opportunities of BRICS, because in itself is trying to expand economic opportunities globally, we need to build on the existing infrastructure. So whatever systems are available, on a voluntary basis, we should be able to say, what are the experiences and the technologies coming out of BRICS that make it easier for the global south to trade? So we're actually not necessarily looking at it adversarially to say we're replacing one over the other. We are just saying that as the world evolves, what opportunities are available from a technology point of view, from an ownership point of view, and from a financial structuring point of view, to be able to understand the aspirations of BRICS entrepreneurs and how do you price risk in the context of BRICS. So the issue coming back to the currencies is that I think the unanimous position that came out of the draft today is that local currencies are meant to be able to obviously avoid currency fluctuations and the vulnerabilities that come with that. So it's not exchange, it's voluntary, but the idea is to say that if it's within your currency, it's within your control, you are able to mitigate the impact of global fiscal shocks, especially on currency volatility.
Is it a question of currency or a payment system that has kept the BRICS intra-trade so low? Yet in other countries like Russia and China, the intra-trade seems to be high. What is a bottleneck? Is it in a policy or that creates a bottleneck for South Africa not to really raise up the levels of intra-trade with the BRICS countries?
Yeah, it's a multitude of issues. I mean, it starts obviously from a regulatory point of view. So you'll know that part of the objectives of the working groups, especially the trade and investment one, is to harmonize policy around trade. So even before you start paying someone, you should be able to access those markets. So obviously, if you're looking at China versus South Africa, sheer size talks to that. So the industrial base in China, the manufacturing capacity, the efficiency thereof is far greater than in South Africa. So we are still stuck in a situation where the best we can do currently is to ship off our raw materials and earn as much as we can there. However, we've not been able to build the sophistication to convert those into value-added goods. Now, the value-added goods obviously come from the fact that you should be able to manufacture them with the correct efficiency and the correct skill set, and then obviously compete with those markets into India or China or even Brazil. So it's not a function just, it's not only on the currency issue, it's capability to compete. And that's what we are saying, that the beauty of BRICS is that it should be a complementary association, not necessarily a brutally competitive one. So that's why you also talk a lot about technology transfer, capacity building amongst the member states, because we are not saying that the economies will ever be equal. I don't think we'll see it in our lifetime, but at least there must be a sense that the complementarities are uplifted and we avoid all the non-tariff measures that are preventing us from increasing our trade. And it all comes back to how then do we allow different member states, based on their capacities, to have the full benefit of their membership. So it's not line for line. There's always going to be different capabilities. The idea is harmonization and complementarities that must be at the forefront and the substance of our relationship among these nations.
Is this what you are taking to India as India is hosting the BRICS chairship this year?
Those are some of the conversations that we are taking into India. So in the month of June 2026, we'll be reflecting in our midterm meeting. We are consolidating our recommendations at working group level, working with all our colleagues, in all the BRICS Plus members. And yes, we will then obviously be putting a South Africa position and ultimately negotiating and confirming it at the summit in India, which will then, as you would know, be part of the annual report that goes to the meeting of the heads of state. But part of that as a trade and investment working group is that everything can be discussed in diplomatic terms. But ultimately, if it doesn't make sense from a trade and investment point of view, people are always going to be suspicious of whether this thing is viable or not. So we are putting our best foot forward to say, how do we leverage complementary regulatory arrangements? How do we leverage digitization for us to be able to be closer to each other? And obviously, how do we then drive infrastructure, especially for Africa, infrastructure that will allow us to be competitive, both from energy, digital connectivity, road and rail connectivity, and in between, obviously, the skill set to make sure that we are making the things that the world wants to buy.
And when are you going to have a meeting with your Indian counterparts? What is the plan there?
So the process is that as soon as a country takes over the chairship, and as soon as the theme is launched, monthly meetings are being held.
Okay.
So for instance, in our case, in the Trade and Investment Working Group, we'll be meeting, the global meeting will take place on the 16th of June, which is the final meeting to consolidate our recommendations. So on a monthly basis, we meet. Every country is allowed to make submissions to the themes, and then also for those that propose recommendations and the initiatives thereof. So we have a global meeting on a monthly basis, but in between there's ongoing negotiation. So yes, we have an open door policy with all the members, including India, and I think it's been a very constructive chairship this year, and we are very confident that some of our ideas will find expression in the annual report, because you know that it's not only about this year's annual report, we are also setting ourselves up because the chairship is coming to South Africa in 2028. So the work that we are doing now is meant to maintain a momentum throughout 2027 into 28 when it's back in South Africa.
And what are the three major things you'd say that will be your success matrix coming from India this year?
I think coming out of India this year is that we must have come up with a digitized end-to-end platform that allows for entrepreneurs to onboard and be profiled and secure in terms of B2B meetings that are easier instead of traveling the traditional way. So if we can come up with a trade platform, we'll be very happy. We are also trying to use the meeting to also recommit to ourselves to multilateralism, because obviously we are a multilateral organization, and if multilateralism doesn't survive globally, it's unlikely to survive in BRICS. So if we can come with rules-based trade regime globally, go back to those basics, protect multilateralism, end-to-end digital platform for us to be able to profile our various entrepreneurs and ultimately set the ground for the ultimate institutionalization of BRICS. Because as you know now, it's more of an association of governments and obviously with us, with business communities. But we want to get to a point where it's an institution where it has the brick and mortar, so to speak, that it's an institution that can stand the test of time, is not dependent on events and political statements, but rather it's rooted in actually economic systems that make it a viable opportunity for South African entrepreneurs.
You sound very upbeat by this year, and I hope that India will really deliver what people have been saying, that it's one thing, as you say, that of having events, but having a secretariat momentum will really push BRICS into a better way of trading, at least with itself. I don't know whether this will be in the form of a policy before that, or whether it will be it will still be on an ad hoc basis. What are you wishing for?
So it will always start off as a proposal, which we hope then can then obviously be maybe chiseled into a recommendation, especially in the China chairship next year. And but in between, there's a lot of hard work, because we need to be able to staff and resource that institution. And we are hoping that it can be launched in South Africa. Great things have been launched in South Africa. The BRICS Business Council itself was launched in South Africa. The expansion of the membership to what we have today, BRICS Plus, was launched in South Africa. So every time it comes to South Africa, we have the potential to really move the needle. So we are hoping that this year we can plant the seed with our colleagues in India. We'll be able to work with our chairship in China next year to really have something that can go to the heads of state. And hopefully in 2028, governments will put their money where their mouths are, and corporate South Africa and corporate BRICS will be able to sustain it and bring media and academia into some sort of an institution where post South Africa's chairship, we can say BRICS is an institution in the true sense of the word that South Africans and all other nationalities can interact with as a home institution, instead of, like we are saying, an event-based formation.
Whether through improvements of trade, innovative payment systems, infrastructure investments, or strong economic corporations, the challenge now is transformation ambition into implementation. Many thanks to Advocate Mtho Xulu for joining us today.